Thank you, Jerry. You've had some of the most impressive historians in these sessions, and now you're going to have a non-historian. I am earning my living at this point, sharing my oral history, and finding out that after all these years, 91 of them, I'm considered a primary source. And a primary source is a job description. Getting back to 1938, which is the years that I graduated from high school, my opportunities for employment were limited to two. As a young woman of color, I could have either worked in agriculture or I could have been a domestic servant. That was the extent of it. When the war broke out, the unions labor unions were not yet racially integrated, so that the Boilermakers organized 3 separate unions that were auxiliaries into which all African Americans were placed, with dues, but no power, no votes. But because all the shipyard workers for the Kaiser Corporation had to be unionized, I was a clerk. You have to understand that my parents were very, very pleased and proud of me, because this was a step up for being an agricultural worker or a domestic servant. But it was also a time that I could not remember in detail. I was a very naive 20-year-old, changing addresses to save the world on 3x5 cards. That was in 1938. Fast forward to about 10 years ago, when I was back in Richmond, this time as a field representative for members of the California State Assembly. I was the field representative for Dion Ariner, and later for Lonnie Hancock, who is now our state senator. I did not become a genius between the time I was 20 and 10 years ago. The country had made that much progress towards social change over the period of my lifetime, so that was possible. I returned to Richmond in charge of a satellite office, helping to determine what kind of legislation would be needed out of the 5 West County cities over which we sat. I was writing speeches for a member of the California State Assembly. This is the time, in October of 2000, when a national park came to Richmond, California. It was celebrating an era that I could barely remember because it had been such a time of confusion for me. I could not relate to the Rosie the Riveter story because that woman whose picture you see of I can do it was a white woman's story. It did not apply to me. I didn't attend the groundbreaking, not because I was boycotting it, but because it simply was out of my experience. Because one of the scattered sites upon which this park was established was the Ford building, the Ford assembly plant, a 400,000 square foot building, quarter-mile long, that was built to build Model A's back in 1931, had been converted for the assembly of tanks and jeeps for the war period. And it was one of the 14 or 15 scattered sites that were out throughout the city that established this park. It was built on air rights. The state of California owned the property upon which the Ford plant was built, which set me at the table with the planners from the Department of Interior, from the National Park Service, and Betty, one small woman of color, because the state had a seat at that table. It soon became very apparent to me that no one in that room recognized the fact that all of those sites were sites of segregation. The Maritime Child Development Center, which was the progenitor for Head Start, actually, had been built so that women could, in comfort, work in the shipyards. Didn't accommodate black families. The HUD-built projects were segregated. The ones that had been saved to become a part of the park were Atchison Village, which was built by the Maritime Commission, where Kaiser management was racially restricted. Nystrom Village, what was built for workers, was racially restricted. There was no grand conspiracy, however. There was no one around that table for me to point out with my anger, because I could see that nobody in the room knew that what gets remembered is a function of who's in the room doing the remembering. Now let me repeat that. What gets remembered is a function of who's in the room doing the remembering. My memories were totally different from anyone else's. Henry Kaiser had come into a city with a population of 23,000 people and brought in a workforce of 98,000 people that he had recruited actively from the 5 southern states of Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Mississippi. Black and white people who wouldn't be sharing drinking fountains or schools or any public accommodations or hospitals for another 20 years back in their places of origin. That wouldn't happen until the 60s. Can you imagine the kinds of social dynamics that were set in motion? There was no time for encounter groups or diversity training or focus groups. They had to build, and mostly sharecroppers, they had to build and did accomplish the task of 747 ships in 3 years and 8 months. And they had to do it under the social system that existed at the time. I mean, that is an amazing feat. The more I learned from those professionals in the room about that story, the better I could relate to the fact that indeed this had been a super accomplishment by extraordinary, ordinary people just like me. It was an amazing thing. Kaiser had brought in first men who were too old to fight, followed by boys who were too young to go, in sequence, then single white women, then married white women, then in 1943, the first black men, and not until late in 1944, black women onto the ships. I could not have been a welder or a riveter at the time that I was filing cards. But what California meant the Greater Bay Area, because it was the nerve center of the war in the Pacific, which was fought out of the Presidio in San Francisco. There were 14 shipbuilding enterprises circling the bay. But it was not only that, it was the center and the focus point of social change for the entire country during those years. This was not only the home of the atom bomb, it was also the birth of the United Nations out of the San Francisco Opera House. This was where change was happening. This is where change, social change, is still happening. So much of what happened over that next 20 years led to the civil rights revolution of the 60s. And it's still going on. I'd like to end with giving you my rather exceptional family history, which is my great-grandmother was born into slavery in St. James Parish in 1846. And she was enslaved until she was 19. She died in 1948 when I was 27 years old. I knew my slave ancestor. My mother, who was raised by my great-grandmother, was born in 1894 and died in 1995 at 101. All of the history, from slavery through Reconstruction and Plessy v. Ferguson and the Scottsboro Boys and the Great Depression, the assassination of two Kennedys, Martin Luther King, the Memphis to Montgomery March, Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, the moon landing, even the Mars probe, all happened within the lifetime of three women who interacted with one another. That is only capped by the fact that on January 20th of 2009, I was seated on the Capitol Mall with a picture of my great-grandmother in my pocket, in the shadow of the Lincoln Memorial, watching the inauguration of the country's first black president. It's really pretty good being a primary source. Thank you.